Welcome, welcome one and all to the brand new season of VHA Accounting Solutions podcast. I'm your host, Vidyant Bola, the CEO and resident number cruncher extraordinaire. Today we are diving headfirst into the wild and wacky world of deceased estates in South Africa. That's right, folks, we're talking about what happens when the Grim Reaper comes knocking and leaves behind a whole mess of financial chaos. But fear not, dear listeners, for I am here to guide you through this treacherous terrain with not one but two episodes dedicated to unraveling the mysteries of deceased estates. So grab your calculators, buckle up, and get ready for a roller coaster ride of estate planning, probate, and maybe even a few ghostly encounters on the way. So sit back, relax, and prepare to laugh, cry, and maybe even learn a thing or two about the afterlife of your finances. That is, welcome to the Deceased Estates in South Africa, a comprehensive podcast extravaganza. Let's get this party started. Stay tuned, folks, because things are about to get dead serious. Introduction. What is a deceased estate? When a person passes away, everything they owned and owed at the time of their death forms what is known as a deceased estate. This estate can include property, bank accounts, vehicles, investments, personal belongings, and even debts. Managing and distributing this estate is a formal legal process, ensuring the deceased's affairs are properly wrapped up and their assets passed on to the right people. The people who are entitled to receive the deceased estate are called beneficiaries. If the deceased left a valid will, if there is no valid will, the estate is distributed among heirs in terms of South Africa's laws of interstate succession. If a person dies interstate, that is without a valid will, the Interstate Succession Act 81 of 1987 comes into play. In these cases, the law determines who inherits following a specific order of priority, usually starting with the surviving spouse, children, parents, and siblings. The absence of a will can lead to unintended consequences, disputes among family members, and delays in finalizing the estate. In South Africa, deceased estates are governed by the Administration of Estates Act 66 of 1965, the Wills Act 7 of 1953, the Interstate Succession Act 81 of 1987, the Marriage Act 25 of 1961, the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act 120 of 1998, and finally, relevant case law and religious considerations in specific contexts. The process is overseen by the Master of High Court, a government official who supervises the administration of deceased estates. The Master ensures that the appointed executor, the person managing the estate, complies with legal requirements, distributes assets correctly, and protects the rights of minor children, surviving spouses, and creditors. How types of marriages affect deceased estates? The maritime regime a person is in significantly influences how their estate is handled upon death. Let's unpack the different types of marriages in South Africa and their implications. Number one, marriage in community of property. This is the default marital regime if no anti-nuptial contract was signed. In the system, both spouses' assets and liabilities are combined into a joint estate from the moment they marry. Implications: when one spouse passes away, one half of the joint estate belongs to the deceased. The surviving spouse automatically retains ownership of their half, and only the deceased half forms part of the deceased estate to be distributed. Key risk: both spouses are jointly liable for each other's debts. Number two, marriage out of community of property without accrual. If the couple signs an anti-nuptial contract that excludes the accrual system, their estates remain completely separate both during the marriage and at death. Implications: each spouse retains their own assets and liabilities. When one spouse dies, their estate is wound up without any claim from the surviving spouse except for maintenance claims in certain circumstances. Number 3, marriage out of community of property with accrual. This is a more modern approach that aims to balance financial growth between spouses. What is the accrual system? The accrual system allows both spouses to keep their estates separate during the marriage, but upon death or divorce, the spouse whose estate grew less is entitled to half of the difference in accrual. Implications at death: the surviving spouse has a financial claim against the deceased estate if the accrual is less. This claim must be settled before distributing the estate to heirs of the beneficiaries. Number 4, customary marriages. Customary marriages recognized under the Recognition of Customary Marriages Act are legally valid if concluded according to the customs of indigenous African people. Implications: if no anti-nuptial contract is signed, these marriages are automatically in community of property. However, polygamous marriages, when a man has more than one wife, can complicate the division of the estate and often requires tailored solutions approved by the Master of High Court. Finally, number 5 is the religious marriages. Religious marriages, such as those under Islamic or Hindu rites, are not automatically recognized under South African civil law unless registered under the Marriage Act or as a civil union. Implications: religious marriages can pose legal challenges if not properly registered. However, courts are increasingly recognizing the rights of spouses in these marriages, particularly in cases of inheritance and maintenance. All right, folks, now we move on to the second half of part 1 of this podcast. As I mentioned earlier, there are 2 parts to this podcast. This part, we reflect on wills. Why is it important to have a will? Having a valid will is one of the most powerful estate planning tools. It ensures that your wishes are honored. You get to choose who inherits what. You can appoint guardians for your minor children. You can minimize potential family disputes. You can nominate an executor who you trust to handle your estate efficiently. It can help reduce delays in administrative burdens for your loved ones. Without a will, you can lose control over who inherits your assets, and your estate will be distributed according to the rigid rules of inter-estate succession, which may not align with your personal wishes. So what are the components of a valid will in South Africa? For a will to be legally valid, it must meet these key requirements under the Wills Act 7 of 1953. The testator must be at least 16 years old and mentally capable of understanding the consequences of a will. The will must be in writing. Verbal instructions are not legal binding. The will must be signed by the testator on each page and at the end of the document. 2 competent witnesses, age 14 or older, and not beneficiaries, must be present and must sign the will in the presence of the testator and each other. If the will is signed on behalf of the testator, due to physical incapacity, strict additional formalities apply. How often should one update your will? Very pertinent question. After major life events like marriage, divorce, birth of children, or acquiring significant assets. If you change your mind about beneficiaries, if your executor is no longer suitable, for example, they passed away, or you can no longer trust them. Regular reviews, at least every 3 to 5 years, are advisable to keep your will current and aligned with your wishes. Can you draft your own will? Yes, you can, but it is strongly recommended to seek professional guidance from an attorney, financial advisor, or fiduciary practitioner to ensure it is valid and properly worded. DIY wills can lead to costly disputes if ambiguities or errors are present. So, what's next, guys? In the next part of the series, we'll take a deep dive into interstate succession laws in South Africa. What happens when someone dies without a valid will? Who inherits and how the distribution process works? If you are curious about who inherits your assets if you passed away without a valid will, stay tuned to our next podcast. Let me leave you. Please like, subscribe, and share this podcast. Please leave in your comments what you think of this podcast. And if you have any ideas for future podcasts, please put them in the comments box. Thank you so much. Until next time, this is Vidyant Bola from VHA Accounting. Cheers.